our situation currently. In the next 6 months, we plan to do X, Y, and Z. So yeah, as long as you tell the story, then that's fine. Because the other thing is, of course, that chicken and egg. If I get the funding, I can get the resources. Or do I get the resources, then hope I get the funding? So I know it's a dilemma, right? And so as long as you're honest and you tell what the situation is, it's all taken into account. Yeah, I mean, and basically your idea is that we don't know if the contract's been in place for a long time. Should we therefore get into that space when perhaps we don't have the partnerships out there? You know, how do we do that? My point of view to all of that is that if you believe you can offer the service, I wouldn't worry about whether it's been there in the past, who's done it in the past. I think I would put it on your merits and see what happens. The other thing is that primary health does encourage a lot of smaller providers, of course, to form some partnerships with other providers because there's strength in numbers, and that might be one way to look at it. But that's something for you to discuss and to decide, I guess, before you submit that tender. But if you're not sure, then by all means put it in as you have, and then say, you know, these are sort of the things that we could do in the future, and yeah, just hopefully on its own merits that will go through. So, okay. So let me go back to the documents for a moment. And the other attachment is the draft contract terms and conditions. Now, I'm not going to go through that in detail, but at the end of the presentation, I do want to talk a bit about the contract. The key thing I want to point out here at the moment is that the draft clearly states that, which suggests that, of course, it's subject to agreement and discussion between the two parties. Right? So I want to talk a bit about that right at the end, what you should and shouldn't do in terms of the contract, and we'll see how we go. So the key thing I want to point out is that, of course, you need to look at all 9 documents carefully. And what I do is this. I will download the documents. I'll have my rough copy, and I'm going to highlight, and I can do it electronically. If you print it, of course, you can sit there with a highlighter. But I'm going to highlight anything I don't understand, that I need to clarify, or any key areas that I need to look at, and becomes my working copy, and I'll have a look at it. Because in my submission, I want to make sure that I've got everything covered. And so that's probably one way to look at that documentation. The other thing is, and I'm sure you do that anyway, but get other people in your organisation to also look at it. You know, they might have a different viewpoint of what that document is. I want to reiterate also that anything you see in the documentation that you don't understand, then go back to the forum on Tenderlink. Has someone asked the same question? And if not, I'll just post up another question. All right? And all of that will be explained. Now, as I said this morning, is that it may happen occasionally, believe it or not, that PHT might make a few mistakes. Maybe they didn't quite make it clear. Maybe they could have put something in there. And the forum is the ideal way, of course, to do that. I'm not saying that your request is going to be fixed, but at least it's highlighted and everybody can see that. So that's probably the way to deal with that. So that's the documentation. And again, you know, purpose of today is not to specifically go through each of those documents word for word. But are there any other questions about documentation? Okay. What I might do is go back to the website, and we're going to have a bit of a look at, well, how do we complete that online response form? So we click here, and there were a few things that came out of the workshops, and so some things that we're probably going to clarify a little bit online as well. But let's have a look at the current situation. So what I have done, as I said, for the purpose of the workshop only, is to register for this tender. And I've made up a silly title. And when I open that up, I can see a lot of documents. So this is where I need to upload my response. Right? So let's have a look at criteria 3 response, for example. And I'll just scroll down and you'll see question 1. What chronic conditions will you target in the community? And specify if there's more than one. Please use question 1 column of the table at attachment 3. And use a separate row for each chronic condition. So you can see here, choose file. So that attachment 3 you should have completed and you need to upload that. There was some confusion about because the second question has an upload button, but the subsequent ones don't. So I know Julie's going to clarify that. So the idea is that your answer can go into the comment field, but obviously you're going to have to upload that attachment 3 as well, somewhere, right? What we're going to do, because there's a lot of questions around this, I'm actually going to post a question up that Julie is going to answer on behalf of everyone in terms of, well, what do I do exactly? So don't worry too much about that. The other thing you see, if I just go back for a moment, I've got to click on that again. By the way, I just want to highlight that you can see I've started to not submit it. And this is the thing, you can go in and out as many times as you like up until the closing time, all right? If I don't like what I started, I can create a new response, but it's only the one I actually submit at the end, that's the one that's going to be the one they assess, right? Now, the thing is that when you actually click on your document, like I'll do that again, unfortunately, I can't go all the way through because otherwise I'm submitting it. So and I can't do that because I'm not going to. But what Julia said this morning is that right at the end, before you hit the submit button, you have an opportunity to upload any other documents that you think are relevant to your submission, any supporting documents, but only if they're relevant. For example, we had a question about if there's a question about quality processes. And somebody says, do we need to upload our own quality statement? And the answer is no. Right, you just need to talk about it. If that's an issue that they want to see, then that will come up should you be successful. Right? So it's really any other documents that support any of those things.
Can I just ask a question? Does
Yep.
that mean, because we're with the THS and we have policies and procedures from, you might say like occupational health and stuff,
Yes.
we can just say as part of the THS we've got blah, blah and blah and that's okay, and if you need to do any follow-up, you would?
Correct. Yeah, so the question is, if we've got health and safety regulations or policies and procedures, we can just say that we've got them, we don't have to upload them. So that's correct.
And the same with, because they, in that tender document, they've got stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so again, the question's about the, what do I upload? We've got lots of internal documents. And really, if it's relevant to that particular question, then that's fine. What we don't want is hundreds of documents uploaded which don't really add to your submission, all right? If there's a document where you say we've got it and you're successful and PHC want to see it, then of course you've got to be able to produce it, right? So, so only if it's relevant to that particular criteria. So as you can see here, there are a whole range of different criteria, and within each criteria there's a range of questions. So the key thing for you is you've got to answer every criteria and every question within the criteria, all right? There's a comments field where you can upload your response, what I would do, by the way, is I would work on a draft document. So I've got a Word document, type it in. When I'm satisfied, I can cut and paste it into there, right? And I can cut and paste it if I have to into that attachment 3. Right? So the thing is you want to make sure it's all good, and I'm going to talk about later on about proofreading, for example, all your information before you submit it. Right? But obviously, whilst you're working on it, there's no point submitting it until you're satisfied with it. And by the way, with the end date, and I'm going to show that on a slide, what I normally do is I give myself 2 days less. So my internal deadline is the 28th. That just gives me a bit of breathing space. And then I work back from there to say, what are all the actions I need to take? I've got to talk to people, I've got to get some information on money and funding or finance. I've got to get some input from people. So I work back from there and then look at how long that takes. There have been a number of questions about the length of time, whether a month was sufficient. I can't answer that question, but obviously that's something that PHD controls. At this stage, you've got the deadline's a deadline, so you've got to make sure you meet it because late responses will not be considered.
Actually,
not quite a month. Yeah. Yeah. And one